There we go.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
For those of you who are just tuning in who don't know me, I am Lee. I go by Mystic Lee.
And me, hello. Probably you don't know who I am. I am Shakti Essence, and otherwise known as Neringa. Should we introduce ourselves, like what we do, or is it just names?
Yeah, you can do.
Okay, yeah. So I'm an ex-porn star and sex worker, and currently I feel like my mission is to deglamorize the sex industry, the porn industry, and just bring as much information as possible to the teens and to the adults, so we are able to protect our offsprings in going after these kind of careers that later down the line can have huge consequences.
I think that's really important, like not only for kids but also for adults, right? Because there's so many that are our age that still don't really fully like understand everything that you've gone through, and probably still have our own little fantasies in our heads, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So my background is I'm Mystic Lee. So I am an energy healer. I'm also a psychic, and I don't know, I've just always been passionate about the topic of sexual abuse, especially when it comes to children. And I think a lot of that is because as you get older, right, you get more mature, you reflect back on your past. And there were definitely things that I saw in my past that I didn't realize were as toxic, right? I think that was because there was a lot of social conditioning at the time. And now I see society is even more aggressive about, sexualization with children. And so it only makes me wonder about, as someone who's who's a healer for people, how much sexual trauma I've had to be involved with healing. How much of that can we avoid versus how much I believe society is almost creating a situation so that more people will be sexually abused and have sexual trauma. So I'm here and would like to talk about that as well, and sexual health.
Amazing, yes.
Because I think one part of it is there's the fantasy, like Shakti, that you were involved with. And then there's also the whole health part of it, right? Because I think even with topics such as like abortion, right, that's becoming more popular for teens in both high school and middle school to get exposure to, is all the other sexual health that you can talk about that will never get you in a situation where abortion is a topic, right? Like all the different, like there's like 9 to 10 different forms of birth control a woman can take, where one of them can be 80% effective on itself. But most people don't know about all these options. And then same with men, right?
Yeah.
But the way they're educating children is very different from if I were to educate, younger people. It's very different than how I would go about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, the curriculum that's being pushed at the minute, it's not suitable to be taught to our kids. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I guess that's where we kind of really want to break it down, right? Since that's what our topic for today is. And for all of you who are just tuning in, we want to do, 5 video series on just talking about sexuality, sexual healing, sexual health, and basically kind of like the do's and don'ts, I guess, the best that we can. But definitely starting with childhood, right? So each country is a little different, I think, in how that they're teaching children with sexual education, but it seems that the West seems to be a bit more aggressive, right? So I know, like with the information you shared with us, Chris, and that you've been sharing on your Facebook page, I mean, you go real in depth with the very specifics with the curriculum that is really alarming.
Well, the thing is, that curriculum, it's being fought in Wales at the minute. Well, that curriculum isn't specific to Wales, England, Scotland, the UK. It's actually a World Health Organization curriculum that's being pushed worldwide. So what was in that video is what's being pushed in, I think it's 127 countries around the world have already got this in place. And Wales is like the last stand to stop it.
Since this is pushed by the World Health Organization, would you say the same countries that are most open to this sexual education are probably the same countries that were most open to the COVID response that they were suggesting?
Yeah, definitely. It's all parcel of the agenda that they're pushing, along with the pandemic response treaty thing that they're trying to push through, that's just been knocked back till, because I think it was the African states and countries wouldn't sign, so they've had to knock it back for a year or two, but they're going to try and push that through, where in the next pandemic the World Health Organization takes control of every country, and every country loses its own sovereignty to deal with the issue itself, which is basically what's happening with the sex education in schools, because you've got this universal program that's being pushed out. And like you say, if you watch those videos that are shared and sent, what's actually in the curriculum and what's in the lesson plans is not suitable for the age of the kids. Now, they're teaching 3 and 4 year olds how to masturbate, right? How is that appropriate sex education? But it's not called masturbation, it's called self-stimulation. So that's how they're getting it past the parents, because the parents aren't looking into what self-stimulation is. They're taking it as self-stimulation must be play or something like that, when it's not. It's masturbation renamed. Do you know what I mean? They're showing kids porn, they're talking to them about DBSM, they're talking to them about anal threesomes. It's not right. No. Do you know what I mean? And they're talking to 4, 5 and 6 year olds about this. But the other thing is, you've got these teachers telling the kids to keep secrets from the parents. Now, I don't care who you are. Nobody has the right to tell a child to keep a secret from their parents. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
That's like Nazism 101.
Well, like, in my eyes, it's just a mass grooming campaign. You know what I mean? It's sexual predators, and these teachers are enabling it.
Yeah. I think it really did start, like, when you look at the whole World Health Organization situation with it all, I think you really kind of start to see the larger picture. Because think about it, the 6 feet distancing, that's our energy fields. That's how far our energy fields have to be away from each other so that you don't feel each other energetically, right? The masks, how that plays a part into your psychology with being more submissive, right? That's a lot of BDSM culture right there, that people who, I just know a lot about BDSM because I'm just really intrigued by it, because it's like a whole culture that's based on consent. But what's interesting is you can kind of see how they've taken these BDSM concepts out of the realm of consent, and they're pushing it on children, right? They're pushing us in the sense of health, right? So it's like, it's almost like actually you see it prior to that, right? You see it with pharmaceuticals, with the introduction with ADHD. Then you see it with the whole introduction with the autism. Then you see, oh, now COVID's the reason, because now we've already drugged your kids to mess with the chemicals of their brains, make them less functional. Because I know here in America, a lot of the school shootings, the kids were on ADHD medications and depression medications at the time that they committed these crimes. Then you've got all the chemicals messing with their brains. Then you've got, like I said, with COVID, you've got the masking, you've got the distancing. And now, so it's like they've paved this way to build up to now teaching young kids about masturbation. It's not like it just happened overnight. It's been this, and even then, I would say with my generation growing up, I remember like with the Olsen twins, right? I remember, because they're a year older than me, that there was a countdown till they were 18. So while all the adults might have been fetishing over them, all the younger females, right, who grew up at, 5-6 years old to marry Kate and Ashley Olsen, once they hit their teen years, they see their bodies as the sexual commodity, right? And so then as a parent, as a child, you were raised to think that your body's a sexual commodity. And then as you become an adult and now you have your children, right, you're more desensitized to being aware, unless you're fully aware, right? You're a little more desensitized and thinking it's normal. So it's something that I feel like they've been practicing for generations. And then with COVID, they were able to energetically sever so many people that now it's messed up our sacral system so much, right? Because our sacral is all about connections with others, right? So they've severed it in such a way that the only place I feel like they can really sever it to completely destroy us now is with the sexual grooming of young children. It's like the ultimate level of just total destruction.
Well, it's like
COVID has been the testing ground to see who is going to acquiesce, who is going to give away their sovereignty, and it's just making people so tolerable to bullshit, know. Because it started from very little, not very little, because so many people have died, but the shot that has been the ultimate. It's like, okay, let's see. Are you gonna do the research? Are you gonna just follow blindly? And majority of the world has followed blindly. So now they are pushing this agenda, which is actually the worst agenda there is, and some of the people that I have actually shared my concerns about this curriculum stuff, they have portrayed it as if it's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I am so angry. I am so angry about that, because I'm like, I don't even, it's not maybe the right approach, but I don't even want to change their mind, because I'm like, you know what? Maybe you are way too far along your, closed-mindedness, and that everything is just a conspiracy theory for you. But reality of things, Balenciaga is showing it right there, clear as day. BDSM bunnies, kids holding that, not bunnies, the bears,
Yeah.
The big stars, they're not doing anything because they're like, oh, okay, well, what can we do?
Yeah, I looked a little bit more into that photo shoot, and it's even more intense than just the kids holding BDSM teddy bears. It's like in the photo shoot, they even have documents of specific cases about trying to shut children up. And it's like, how can it be like, I understand art, like maybe more than the average person, to realize that this is an expression of art. This is an expression of a culture of pedophiles who are screaming to be accepted in the world, to be accepted for who they are. And so they're doing it in their art, like all artists do, right? Because that's the bridge, that's the gateway into social acceptance, right? Because once it's accepted through art, and I've seen this grow even before this. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, down here in the Southeast. It's one of the major cities in the US. And at one of our museums, I went in there one time, there was no warning. And these were 2-story tall paintings of sexual abuse. It was all done in just black images, but these were shadow images of stereotyping black racism. And these black people were having swords shoved up their butts. They were urinating on their faces. They had milk coming out of their boobs everywhere. It was like this weird artistic display of demonizing Southern culture with the racism in a way that was never done. But it was like, anyways, I called the museum to complain because I took my children in there because there was no sign. And I thought, this is as an adult who loves to visit strip clubs and stuff, this was the thing that made me be like, what the fudge sickles did I just walk into? And when I called the museum, because my husband also noticed when we were going through the museums, there's statues, old statues of naked 12-year-olds and 10-year-olds. And he was like, my husband was like, how is this not considered child porn? You know, it's like a statue. If it was a picture of a naked person, it would be considered pedophilia. But now that it's a statue people can touch, how is that considered art and not, you know, pedophile pornographic, right? So when I called the museum to talk to them about it, they just told me that I needed to learn to get over myself because art is expressed in all these different ways. And that if I found it offensive, that I could just not come back to the museum.
Wow.
And, you know, that's kind of, I think it's very foretelling of how art, right? It can be beautiful, it can be expressive, but it is also can be manipulative, right? Like when art is exposed to the masses, it's a way of getting people to accept things that they normally wouldn't because it's for art. And I'm thinking,
and that's again the tolerance. The tolerance has been stretched. It's like, how much are we going to tolerate?
Because when I walked into that display, and I promise you, as someone who's grown up in the Deep South, I have been around KKK members before. I have been around some pretty weird situations. And when I saw that art display, to this day, I still think it's one of the most racist things I've ever seen. It's one of the most derogatory and most, because it's sexual violence towards Black people as two-story art. I don't understand how the Black community doesn't come up and say, what the heck is this? You're like getting off on sexually abusing our type of people. Like but for people to celebrate something like that as art instead of seeing it for what it is, somebody who clearly has an issue, clearly fantasizes about something like this, right? It's just like, there's a difference between Gothic art that's very dark because someone's expressing their dark art versus I'm in this high class, high artistic museum and here it is with no warning, no, hey, this might be R-rated, don't bring your, you know, might be sensitive to kids. It's like you walk in and it's like you're in a bright white room with art and it's 2 feet tall in front of your face.
Well,
wow.
It's like if you look at the drag queen story time, do you know what I mean, which started in America, it's now over here, and the drag acts that are doing these drag queen story times are completely inappropriate to be around kids. The things that they're saying and talking to the kids about are completely inappropriate. It's like there was an incident over here, I think it was a library in London that had one of these drag queen story time things on, and when the guys walked out, he had assless chaps on and a big strap-on dildo hanging where his cock should be. Now, if I'd have took my kid to that, I'd have been getting arrested. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd have gone for him straight away. That's inappropriate. But how?
But they get a pass. They get a pass, right? What I think is crazy is as a society, as we are doing drag queen shows for kids and now all of this very weird transgender things, allowing men to take over women's spaces under the guise of being transgender. I think it's all really sick because as we are seeing more of that, we don't talk about cross-dressing. Transvestites. Transvestites are just cross-dressers. Why can't, if it's about acceptance for kids, why don't you just have a cross-dresser come read to children? Why is it a drag queen? You know, like there's a difference between the two of them, right?
Yeah.
And even then, I think all of that is so crazy. So here in America, we recently had a big shooting at a gay bar, and it was because someone from an actual transgender from the transgender community, because here in America, the real transgenders, the people who actually are legitimate transgenders, are mortified by what's happening with the drag queen shows. They're mortified by how their transgender identity is being used to impose on women. And so it was actually, from my understanding, a transgender who actually went into the club shooting up people because the next night they were going to host a drag queen show for children. So it's just interesting as because I'm just interested in people in general, but it's really interesting to see all this weird sexualization with children with the whole transgender movement, because people who are legitimate transgenders are probably the loudest protesters against all the sexualization of children.
Exactly.
They are the
Yeah.
most against transitioning children chemically, because they will even tell you scientifically, if you give them these drugs later, they can't have the surgeries that they need to physically transition their bodies. And then they talk about the mental health of it. And I know here where I live, so in the United States, they've got like the national school system, right? And they get extra funding from the federal government if you're part of the federal school system, which is totally with the World Health Organization, to the point if you're a parent that shows up to a school board meeting, and you make known that you're against the sexualization of children, they will actually put you on an FBI domestic terrorist list. Now, my state is not part of that. Our governor pulled away from that, but even in my county, they said they're against that, but you still find it happening in the schools regularly. So not in my elementary school, but most of the parents around here are tone deaf, so I can't really ask them questions. But I know in some of the other schools that are in our county and in our school system that they have had issues. Like one of my friends, she sold her house and moved to Florida within 1 month because one of the other kids was talking about when the kid was at her house, was talking about being in school, how the teacher was telling them, oh, those aren't boys anymore, those are girls. And how there were 2 boys in their class that they had to now call girls and reference them as girls, and how they were told that they were not supposed to talk about this with their parents. And, you know, there's always a chatterbox in every classroom, you know, those kids who just can't keep their mouth shut. Even when mommy and daddy say to, they can't. They're blabbermouths. They're kids. And because we are in an area that is not only a state against it, but a county that is supposedly against it, and to see that is still happening in the schools without any pushback, you know, it's like I can't even, that's why, like, with my kids being homeschooled, I have a hard time even connecting with the other parents in the neighborhood when we get together, because all they do is talk about this in school and that in school. And then when I bring up things like, hey, did you know the vice principal of the school district over was just arrested for pedophilia? They're like, oh, well, how do you know that's real? How do you know the student didn't make it up? You know, to hear that that's the immediate response from parents is like, well, for them to be arrested, it means that there had to be a lot to be done, because it's like so hard to get to that point. And for a child to have to come up, you know, it's not an easy process. And just to think like, well, what if it's happening to your child at this point? Would you even know? You're so busy like drinking and letting your kids just run amok, you know, around. Like how,
and
you know what I'm saying?
And you know what, like,
and then
the
kids are going to be touching each
what
other because they don't understand, you know?
Yeah. What's the word that I'm looking for? I don't think I can pronounce it properly, but desensitizing, yeah?
Yeah.
Hence why, desensitizing, right? Hence why even parents, when this kind of stuff, the sexual abuse, you know, happening to their own kids, they will just be like, kind of get over it. They will just turn the blind eye, you know. And it's like, what kind of world are we living in that even if we are not going to protect our own kid, you know?
Yeah.
Well, it's like you've got the teachers. You've got the teachers telling the kids, "Don't tell your parents about this, and don't tell your parents about that," and that's a person of authority to that child. So if they're telling them to keep secrets from their parents, if then somebody does start abusing that child and tells them don't say anything, that child's going to take that as another person of authority telling them not to say something, and they won't speak out. So schools are not a safe place anymore. And these
then you have to think about how does this reflect to the actual pedophile, right? If you are a pedophile yourself and you want access to be able to get that fix, well, now the school systems, right? Now, you know, if you touch a child, it's just, you can call the parent a conspiracy theorist. You can even call them a racist at this point. Because that's, I mean, if you're already that person who's going to be manipulating and sexually abusing children, knowing that you can be in a system that's going to protect you as an abuser, that's going to actually give you the materials and the support to abuse the children. I mean, it's like a breeding ground for that.
Well,
everyone who's an abuser now, who might not be considered, who might never have considered to be a teacher, will now consider being a teacher, because all you need is a college degree and to take a test. And let me tell you, I took that test, and it's probably the easiest test I've ever taken in my life, because I'm actually certified to be a middle school social studies teacher. And they grade you based on everyone else. And I actually scored so high that I actually could get bonus pay. And to me, that was really scary, because I was like, wow, I scored so high. Why would I even have someone else teach my kid, just in general? But now that's just how easy it is to get certified to be a teacher, to be around kids.
Well, the thing is, I think it was September when the kids went back to school in Scotland. They were sent home with a flyer, some of these kids. And on this flyer, it was like a little cartoon, basically talking about discrimination. But it was saying, if a stranger comes up to you, don't scream or shout. They're not all going to hurt you. Don't call them a paedophile. Don't call them a paedophile, because that can be as offensive as the N-word.
Wow.
And this is what they're giving to kids. This is what schools were giving to kids. How is that right? It's like,
how did more parents? See, this is what I don't understand.
Because when it went viral on Facebook and social media and stuff, there were a lot of people who say, "Oh, that's not true. Somebody's just made that themselves. It's that schools wouldn't give something like that." But rather than going and actually having a look and doing their own investigations, it's like, again, on that video that I sent you from the girls in Wales who were actually fighting this. It's a case of, there was a parent in Scotland, went onto the government website, looked at the lesson plans, printed some of them off and shared it on social media, and got banned on social media because the images showed adult nudity. Yet this is what they're showing to 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, right? You can't show it on social media, so why are you showing it to kids in school?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
That's
it doesn't
like here.
make sense.
That's like here in America, we've had, this is one of the things that puts parents on the FBI domestic terrorist list, is parents have found the pornographic books in the school libraries. And so they've taken them to the school board meetings and started reading them. And the school board has told them, you can't read that here. This is inappropriate. And they said, well, my kid brought this from home from the school library. So why, if it's not appropriate for me to read here, why is it appropriate to be in a kid's middle school? And that put that person on the FBI domestic terrorist list.
Well, it's like that. They're showing kids porn. So as an ex-porn star, how would you feel if one of your films was getting shown in a school to kids? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just wrong.
I mean, these are conversations.
Well, I think like from my
college, you know, maybe we should start teaching this on the college level before we jump down to 5-year-olds.
Well, it's like they're saying it's to prevent teen pregnancy, and it's to,
I think it's going to increase teen pregnancy
and lower STDs and this, that, and this, right? But the age groups that they're teaching it to is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. They're the ones that they've already rolled it out to. The 12, 13, 14, the ones who could do with that type of sex education, if it's taught correctly, it's not even rolled out. It's like, I think the 12-year-olds isn't due to be rolled out till next year, and then do you know what I mean? So the older ones, it's still to come. It's the younger ones. Now, why are you targeting the younger ones? Do you know what I mean? It's just trying to normalize this sexualizing children. And it's a case of kids are kids. Kids play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're going to play with each other with the new stuff they just learned.
They use their imaginations and they play.
Yeah.
They're not interested in sex. Do you know what I mean? And it shouldn't be being pushed on them. Let kids be kids. That's the top and bottom of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because them videos I've sent you that are on my Facebook page, I'll reshare them. I'll post them in the comments of this afterwards if anyone wants to watch them. But it's a case of I've tried explaining to parents I know and saying, look, you need to have a look at this. This is what they're teaching. And they're like, oh, well, that's a good thing. And it's like, no, because it's this, this, and this. And they're like, oh, it's you one of your conspiracy theories in it. And it's like, well, no, because it's not a conspiracy theory. This is what's happening in the schools. You need to know. And the way that they've done it as well, it's not a sex education class where
it's a sexual grooming class.
Well, no, it's not just a specific lesson. So you go to this lesson, like a social studies lesson or whatever it is, and you have your sex education lesson. They've integrated it into every lesson through the school. So it's your English, your history, everything has got this shit woven into it. So you can't get away from it. And the pushing that you can't opt out of your kid taking part. So
it sounds like a cult, right? It's like once you start on that, you can't get out. What the fuck?
Yeah, but they're trying to take away the parental right to opt out your kid taking part in these lessons, and that's wrong. At the end of the day, as a parent, you have the right to say, no, I am not happy and not comfortable with my child being in that lesson and taking part and learning that. That is not appropriate for the age group. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it is.
But you know what? What's coming up? Mad. What's coming up to me as well, because we touched on porn, so I can actually speak on this as well, is that parents are so afraid to speak about sex in general with their kids. You know, they might leave it too late, or they might never do it. Right? My mom has never done it. She just said, you know, if you don't use condoms, you get pregnant. That's your problem. That's all. That's all the conversation that we have had. You know, hence why then, with all of my traumas and losing my virginity very young with a guy 10 years older than me, I did not think that, you know, going into sex work and porn is actually that bad, I guess, because my trauma was driving me into those paths, right? So parents leave this sex education, just even the most basic sex education to schools, to the internet, to the movies, right? And so what kids are learning from very early age, because porn is so accessible, you know, and there are organizations like Exodus Cry that are fighting that very much, you know, like ending teen porn and stuff like this, because it's like, if you think about it, if a child is watching a porn and a girl that is an actress is looking 12, is like, she looks like she's 12, these kids will be like, okay, so this is normal, you know. I know of a girl, my friend shared me this in confidence, so I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but her little girl asked what a prostitute was, and when she explained to her, you know, in a most kind of child suitable way, because this girl, I think, was like 6 years old or something, you know, and because of her trauma with her dad, which she didn't have a dad really, you know, her dad abandoned her from a little age. She said, oh, I want men to pay me to love me.
Yeah.
And if parents are not having if parents are not having the conversations like this from the early age, saying, you know, I understand that daddy left you, you know, but we can have a different way. You don't have to go and sell your soul to get the love from men, because personally I wanted to be loved too. My mom and dad did not love me. I'm getting emotional. My mom and dad didn't love me the way I needed to be loved as a child. So I thought getting paid and having that attention from men is what will make me happy, you know? And so kids start thinking that from the early age. Like I don't even know, like I said, this girl, she was like 6 years old and she already kind of like programming herself because of the society what she needs when she will get older, you know? She's already like being groomed by her own thoughts to make it normal.
Well, that's something
part of that coming from social media, because you've got Instagram where they're posting the pictures for the likes and the attention. TikTok, they're doing the dances and they're craving the attention. But then the next step from that is the OnlyFans, and the next step.
Exactly, because OnlyFans has become a meme now, right? So everyone is throwing in OnlyFans like it's the biggest joke, right? But like, oh, everyone wants to be 0.1%, you know, not actually realizing that you are just an object.
It's like the amount of girls doing the OnlyFans, and I'm empowered, I'm earning my own money, I'm earning this much money. Do you know what I mean? But
and you
they're
know
not
what?
actually empowering themselves. They're giving away their power.
The worst thing, like I will tell you a little bit of the inside information. When I quit porn and when I was trying to get out of escorting during the pandemic as well, I was helping my friend, my ex-friend, she's no longer my friend, who is an international porn star. And so I was doing her OnlyFans for her. Because she hates technology, right? So it wasn't even her. And I was on Telegram. I was kind of like, because I was a personal assistant, I was doing the shout out, right? So you contact the girls, you get their little description, you get their pictures, you schedule a time a day, and then they post your pictures on their page, you post their pictures on your page. The shit I have seen, there are girls that are not even 18 and they have so much money in their balance that they're just waiting until they're legal so they can get their money out.
Wow.
Can you imagine this?
I mean, to start life off, I mean, that way is pretty intense. Okay, go tell Lily. Go close the door. Thank you. Run. Talking about children. No. Bye.
But again, they shouldn't.
Okay, go tell Lily. Thank
right,
you.
They've earned that money, but they shouldn't be able to get that money. All their content should be taken down because they're under 18. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How
exactly?
Wait till they're 18
they
and then
even
they get
allowed on the website?
Yeah.
Exactly.
How are those websites not then taken to court for child trafficking at that point? Because then technically they are making and distributing child pornography.
Exactly.
I absolutely love I have a kid in the room while we're... No, come on, out. Give me just a moment.
Yeah, no problem.
Right now until you behave and after you eat your lunch. We're going to eat lunch after this, and if you eat all your lunch, then you can have a candy cane.
Yeah, so another thing that I would like to touch on is like when it comes to children trafficking and, any kind of trafficking, to be honest, but because we are on the subject of children, like Pornhub has been really like clamped down because Visa has taking themselves off the Pornhub as one of the payment options, because they were like, we want nothing to do with this, because there has been tons and tons of movies of rape, of incest, of child trafficking and whatnot on Pornhub in itself,
Yeah.
So now I think if I'm not mistaken, the head of the Pornhub or whatever, I don't know the title, but he has resigned. because it's about to blow up. It's like we're already stepping in, because we are in Sagittarius season. All the darkness is coming to light. Hence why Balenciaga stuff is like so out in the open, and it's like really being shown that whatever this campaign was, it's actually a satanic ritual.
Yeah. Well, what's also, I think, crazy with all of it and what you've exposed here is we think about this as being for adults, right? Adults doing adult things. But even in trying to make a legal platform, right, for adults doing adult things, it sounds like even with that, we're still getting pedophilia involved, even when you're trying to do it legal. And I think that's my biggest concern when it comes to sex workers, right? Because so much of it is illegal, which creates its own dangers, right? Which I think feeds into the sex trafficking. But then even when you have platforms like Pornhub or OnlyFans, and it sounds like even with platforms like that, trying to keep things legal for adults, there's still the child aspect. And I'm sure the sex trafficking slipping in underneath because they're not able to, even with it being legal, censor it enough or filter it enough to keep out the age appropriateness. And to me, that kind of talks about the issues of sex beyond whether it's legal or not, right? Because growing up, I always thought, oh, the dangers of it is because it's illegal, but it's showing that our society is in a much darker place than that, right? And it's crazy to think that it's still technically illegal to be a prostitute, but yet they are sexually grooming children at 5 years old in public school with this information. And there's a few other things that I was thinking about when you were talking about this, like with the 6-year-old, is I remember as, I was a huge Spice Girl fan. And I just, again, growing up, I remember being taught, well, as a woman, if you get married, it's a form of prostitution too. If you're a stay-at-home parent, a stay-at-home mom, it's a form of prostitution. That's what was shoved down my throat growing up. Well, you still, you're getting paid from the person you're having sex with. That's where your money comes from. So how is that any different than being a prostitute, right? Or being just a stripper, right? Because at least with stripping, you're not physically touching anyone, and you can make all this more money than if you're a stay-at-home mom, right? And so there's been like so much programming that I feel like I've been subjected to with this, like even here in this neighborhood I live in, I don't know very many other stay-at-home moms. As soon as their kid hits kindergarten, they go get a part-time job, because it's almost like we've been indoctrinated that unless we're bringing in money, we have no value as women. We don't have value as women being stay-at-home mothers, even though it's a much harder job than most of the ones that pay money. Yeah. And so there's all this programming that's already been put there with parents beforehand. So if you are one of those parents that you yourself as a woman might feel like you don't have value unless you have a job, that staying at home, taking your kids isn't as valuable as bringing in a paycheck, then I would assume that if your child is being taught to use their body for sex in that way, you're going to be a little bit less eager to say something, because your values are more for the dollar than the money than it is for anything else at that point, which that's a lot of things.
Part of that is the society that we're in is geared so both parents have to work.
Yeah.
And then
so no one looks after the kids. The school is looking after the kids.
The state raises the kids because the kids are in school, so the state raises them. And then if you look at what they're actually teaching them now and what's this curriculum that's been brought in, then the kids aren't safe. But the parents are too busy having to go to work because wages are that shit. That both parents have to work to be able to provide a home, and especially at the minute with the cost of living being pushed up through the roof. But again, that's all being done deliberately. Do you know what I mean? And
so we have one question from Anna Kowalsuk. She's asking, what teachers, public and or private schools? So I know for sure this is happening in public schools, but I think that is another question is private schools, right? I know for a fact there's got to be stuff happening in private schools here because I know for a fact that when the issues with Donald Trump and Joe Biden with the election of 2020, there were a lot of mainstream private schools that were threatening to not graduate students who were Trump fans. So I can only, and I know in middle schools, they're already teaching the transgender stuff. And I know for one of the big private high schools, as in all the parents there are like millionaires. Even those parents who are millionaires are having issues with protecting their own children in the private schools, as in the private schools have contacted parents telling them that they will not only, kick their kid out, but they're going to go after these people's personal businesses. If they don't take down, like they've made social media accounts to try and expose a lot of the stuff happening in the school. So when they found out which parents were in charge of it, they told them that they were going to go after them, after their businesses as well, if they didn't remove those. So I can only imagine, because when you get into private schools, you get into that weird hush-hush world where everyone is even more so about appearances and about money connections and sweeping things under the rug. It used to be as a parent in private school, you could have more to say. But now I think because we just live in a society where money is so valued more than family, and that's considered to be more of a norm, I think it's really hard to tell. But my main issue is children touching children, right? Because you start telling them this at that young age, they're going to get curious.
Yeah.
Why? Thank you. Bye. Yes, thank you. Can you? This is what happens when she knows Daddy's not here to round her up.
Well, I think it's a bonus. It's a bonus because we are actually talking about kids, so them coming in, it's okay.
Yeah. And my kids have picked up on some things too. I try and keep them out of it, but I mean, my oldest is in second grade now, so she's at that age where in the public schools around here, they're already teaching that stuff. So it's hard. It's like, even you want to think, even being a homeschool parent, you can just let your kid go off with the neighbors, but the neighbors are in public school. So, and you can't talk to their parent about things. And so sometimes I do hear my kids come back and say, we'll say things like, oh, that person said that they're going to kill somebody, and that's when I have to learn how to let go and trust my own kids' opinions, because they seem to be picking up on things, like especially my son. My son hardly can make friends with other kids. He's just not interested. Oh, thank you. Can you please go close the door? So but again, it comes to like, how in tune are you with your child, right? Like even in public school, even if your kid's not telling you something, as a sensitive parent, right? You can kind of tell, right? It might not be the teacher. It might be another student, right? But as a parent, like, and even if, let's say, your child is in a classroom with a wonderful, fantastic teacher, right? Because some of these teachers in schools are aware of what's happening. They're doing what they can to fight for the children. But still, you have teachers that, like, they can't control the whole situation, right? They try their best. But if you don't have a principal that backs up a teacher, right, the teacher is still limited. And
well, the other issue with the teachers at the minute, all the old school, old-fashioned style teachers, a lot of them have gone.
Yeah, and they've been pushed out or
retired. What you've got is these younger teachers who think the way they've been trained and what they're teaching, and this is the right thing, and do you know what I mean? And you can't explain to them what you're teaching that child is wrong. Do you know what I mean?
I have to wonder with some of these teachers who are teaching these things, like if you look into their own family history, how much abuse is it? How much abuse were they raised with? That's probably why they think this way. I think.
Well, that's it. It's what traumas have they suffered as they've grown up? Yeah.
The trauma that they probably were introduced to as a kid, plus with the toxic teachings at the time. Then you have therapists which there are some great therapists out there, but 90% of them.
My merchandise office.
Okay, go get it. 90%, I believe, of therapists are teaching, like they're teaching the Freudian psychology, not the Carl Jung psychology. Like, imagine how much different everything would be if when that moment came to choose between Freudian and Jung, the world went with Freudian. What if they went with Carl Jung? Like, everything would be different because not everything would be based on sexuality. It would be based on spirituality. And, okay, we'll go. Please go close the door. Okay, I'll do that after you go away. Bye. Okay, I'll do it on Sunday. I think she realized. I think she. I got distracted. ADHD, worse than a cat.
So you mentioned how it would be much better if kids were taught on the spirituality.
So think about Freudian society. That would have been our grandparents would have been raised under those ideas, our parents, ourselves, and then our children. So if you think about how much society has changed and how much more it's sexually open, sometimes for good reasons. Like, at least now I can walk around showing my ankle without being called a hoe. Versus how far we've gone also in the toxic ways, right? Just, a lot of the pedophilia we talk about today, I mean, our parents grew up with it. Right? Like, when you start looking into like stuff going on with the Catholic Church and a lot of that other stuff, I mean, that was going on in the 60s and the 50s that we know of, right?
All the single mothers who had the kids taken off them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You had the child trafficking right in front of you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's always been there. But because it was the church, it was the best thing for the kids, and it was this, it was that, and that's the mentality they had. Do you know what I mean? Because they were God-fearing people, because the social control system that was in place was the religion, whereas religion's fallen to the side now. So now they're trying to apply different social controls. So they're coming up with the extremes of viruses and sporting events and everything else to try and keep the masses occupied, dumbed down, and controlled. And
the bread entertainment, I think, is what the Romans called it.
Yeah,
that's how they controlled everyone. Bread and entertainment. So if you got all the processed food, right, all that McDonald's, that's infused with stem cells from aborted babies, and then you've got your Netflix and
fluoride in the water.
Right. And then even Netflix and chill's like considered a sexual term.
Yeah.
Right. Because you invite people to come over and watch a movie, and then the expectations isn't really to watch the movie anymore because you're not at a movie theater. So it's the date going out to a movie. I mean, man, it's so cheap now. You just need your Netflix and chill. Like it's
again, if you look at Disney, I'm sure I read something the other day that the CEO of Disney stepped down because of the backlash of all the...
Like that Santa program that says, I love Satan?
No, I think that might have been part of it, but I think it's partly to do with they've been pushing the transgender, the sexuality of children and all this. And where Disney's always done it, and it's always been there in the background, it's blatantly been in your face for the last couple of years. But I think...
Well, I've noticed even in this new... So we do have Disney. We haven't gotten rid of it yet. So I've been watching some of the shows on there. It's interesting. The adult shows don't have all the weird racial context and sexual innuendos that I'm noticing is being put in the children's shows. So like we watch the Star Wars stuff. It is kind of weird that they have less aliens in Star Wars than the movies did. So that's a little strange, but there's not a sexualization outside. I mean, it's probably more squeaky clean than most other shows when it comes to sexual content. But then we were watching the Ms. Marvel stuff, which is made for children, and it's talking about whitewashing. I mean, the whole thing is about the white imperialists, and they try and put it in there here and there. And I was watching another show on Netflix called The Warrior Nun, and the whole second season is like about some weird lesbian relationship. Which, by the way, I think the Xena episodes have more lesbian context in it than they tried to create with these characters. And I thought, wow, you are so thirsting to make everything gay that you took characters who are supposed to be Catholic nuns and you made them lesbians, but that they weren't really lesbians until the very last episode where they start making out with each other before she disappears.
But this is depopulation right there, right in your face.
This is disrespectful towards somebody's religion, where the religion is very like, you're not like that. And why would you even put it in? It doesn't even make any sense to the character's story or the story of any of it. It's like the storyline went flat, and so they just decided to make them gay.
Like you mentioned, the Marvel films. If you look at the Marvel films that have come out recently, like Thor: Love and Thunder, right? Yeah. How
making the two babies with your hands in the lava.
Well, how demasculated is Thor? Do you know what I mean? He's walking around like a blithering idiot.
Yeah.
And then you've got Jane, his ex-girlfriend, who's now got his powers. You know what I mean?
Again, that's somebody's religion.
And I've got nothing against strong feminine characters, because that's needed as well. Do you know what I mean? The divine feminine needs to shine through, but not at the expense of the divine masculine. And it's not just that one film. There is a cancel culture on masculinity, and it's happening across the board, especially white males.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's being pushed. If you're a white male, you're trash, and it's not right. We're all equal. We're all divine beings. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is also the impact and effect it has on boys. You know, if they're
women.
Yeah, if they're growing up hearing these messages, they grow up with no self-esteem, no confidence. You know.
I mean, if you're a white sissy boy, you're like perfect for society to pick up and groom and turn you into a woman.
Yeah.
Like it's alarming.
The other thing is, it's like Canada, the States, the UK, they're all pushing this demasculine agenda. But if you look at China, China's pushing the opposite.
Yeah. That's because they have too many. China has their own issues because they had the one-child policy for so long. And so a lot of people, when they found out they were having girls, it's really weird. People who lived in the city who had the money to send their child to school didn't care what gender their child was. But anybody who was a farmer, like they needed a boy, right, to help with the farm work. So you have, I think, like 3 males to 1 female in China right now. Plus all the women are educated, where the men are not so educated. So their whole thing is very different there, because also their economy, even though we like to think it's great, is so bad that even though now China is pushing for a 3-child policy, most people are only having 1 child, if they even have a child, because their apartments are so tiny and everything is so expensive that, you know, like people who live out in the farms, they'll have a child, but then both parents have to leave to go live at these factories to work at, and only get to see their child and only see their spouse, like, you know, for New Year's every year. And so like they're also having all those protests right now between the banking system, the COVID lockdowns. They've sent all the kids home. Kids are not allowed to go to school right now. They're sitting in the military tanks, which they started in October with the bank protests. So like China has such a shitstorm brewing in its own, but you know, I think.
Well, the other thing is, if you look at it another way, because China actually spoke out about America and how they were being transphobic and homophobic and this kind of thing, when it's illegal in China. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at their track record for human rights abuses, how can they call anybody? But then if you look at it another way, why is China pushing that America should demasculinize the male population and the rest of the world should demasculinize the male population, when they're pushing the opposite and they're emasculating their male population? Because who would you rather fight?
Yeah.
A
I think that's like Top Gun.
You know what I mean? So again, there's another reason behind it all.
Yeah. I think that's why Top Gun became such a huge movie, but a huge political symbol. So when the new Top Gun movie came out, it was supposed to come out right when the pandemic hit, but they delayed it coming out because obviously no one could get to movie theaters. They weren't open. So in the previews, they changed his jacket so it didn't have the Taiwan flag on it. Well, when the movie was released, he wore the Taiwan flag on it. And, you know, that movie is such a symbol of male empowerment, male American empowerment. They actually didn't allow it to be filmed in China. And it's the first big box hit. Not only was it a huge box hit, bigger than normal, it was a box hit that didn't have the Chinese movie community, which is normally what makes a box hit a box hit. So that's why I think when we talk about social and we talk about movies and the influence on culture, that movie has a much larger world political symbolism to it than I think a lot of people realize, because it shows that even with all this shit going on deep down inside so many people, Top Gun, Tom Cruise's character in it is what people still want to look up to. Even though in the back of our minds we're being told, oh, white men are horrible and this and that. In the back of our head, we still want that Tom Cruise. We still trust in that Tom Cruise, you know, fighter to show up and just take it at the end. But it's actually really interesting when you see the Chinese movies, they have their own version of a Top Gun. And of course, America is always the evil villain in all their movies, just like in America, it would be Russia or the Nazis. In their films, it's all Americans. And so again, there's that like when I was in college, I speak Mandarin Chinese and I was taking Mandarin classes, and I was very involved with the Confucius Institute. So here in the US, they shut down all the Confucius Institutes because they have direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And I noticed with the exchange students, I would try and invite them to my house because, you know, my husband's parents they come from a well-respected Korean family. And Koreans are really the only other country that Chinese people have any respect for. Okay, well, go tell them that's not true. And so when I would talk to these students to invite them, they told me they weren't allowed to leave campus because America is too dangerous. And they literally weren't even allowed to have lunch with me.
Wow.
Because the Chinese Communist Party kept them under such a thumb that as exchange students, they weren't even allowed to converse with Americans outside of me coming to the Confucius Institute to try and practice my Chinese, but instead I ended up helping them practice their English. So it's there's a lot with that going on, but again, it still goes back to the World Health Organization, right? Because technically China is not in good relationships with the World Health Organization, but a lot of what the World Health Organization takes to oppress the world, they're taking from what the Chinese are doing within their own borders.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with this,
showing everyone is nobody's friends, but everybody's enemies and everybody's friends at the same time when it comes to all those people in those groups.
Well, it's like the sexual education fucking lesson plans that are being pushed on us and forced on our kids that have been funded and set up by the World Health Organization.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take into account different religious views. Don't take into account different people's views, you know what I mean, of how you've been raised, and you've just got this flat, this is how it's going to be, and we're going to roll it out around the world. And every country's got its own cultural issues that is going to clash with this lesson plan, whether it is cultural, religious, do you know what I mean? And that's just being brushed over and no, this is how we're doing it, and they're just rolling it out. And how can you have that one universal lesson plan on a subject? Do you know what I mean?
It's like all the pharmaceutical drugs. They only test it on like one group, one population, which is typically like Caucasian, and then they roll it out for everybody else, blacks, Asians, like Native Americans like me. Like I have to tell them every time they give me a pharmaceutical, I'm like, what are the side effects? They're like, there aren't any. And then I look it up and I'm like, there are side effects. They're like, they're not common. I'm like, I'm not a common person. So those affect me. So like I've even had to call my pharmacist and tell them like, you have to put a special note on my account because I don't have the normal response to pharmaceuticals. And you wouldn't know because not very many Southeastern Native Americans are even involved in any pharmaceutical like trials. And that's just being innocent with pharmaceuticals. We all know it's all just a shit show of the worst drug dealers on the planet, which is a whole nother topic. But I mean, again, it goes back to children, right? Because as children, because I grew up in a school for ADHD kids. I mean, my brother was put on Adderall when he was 5 years old. And every day of his life, I mean, he looked anorexic when he was in high school. Then all of a sudden he gets old enough to tell my parents and say, I don't want to be on Adderall. I'm 18 now. I can tell you go fuck yourself. Now all of a sudden he's like a typical Southern fat boy because he went from never having an appetite because the chemicals oppressed his appetite to all of a sudden now he has an appetite as an 18-year-old man. And we all know 18-year-old men eat more anyway. And so it's like, I worry about what type of health issues that cause from being underweight to overweight. And then growing up as a girl where everyone's taking Adderall. So all the girls at my school were much smaller than everyone at everyone else's school. You know, that creates body images because, right, they're skinny because they aren't eating. Then when they get older, they think, you know, as adults, I see people try to get off their Adderall and they can't control their brain whatsoever because they've been on Adderall their entire life. So when they get off of it, all of a sudden it's ramping up. It's doing all these things it's not used to doing. And then they hate themselves because all of a sudden they're more impulsive. They can't control it. They're saying things they wish they didn't because they're being impulsive. But again, it starts back with the grooming of children with drugs. And I think it's even recently came out that those drugs are bullshit.
Vaccinations.
Behind them was false.
It's all the vaccinating your kid from the day it's born. You're injecting it with chemicals. And I read something.
Cutting off the top of their penis.
Well, I read something somewhere, and the Tide Pod detergent capsules have got something like 22 chemicals in them. 17 of them chemicals are in these vaccinations that you're giving to a baby.
That's disgusting.
How is that even legal? Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
it doesn't make sense.
Start telling people about how bad vaccinations are. They start talking about smallpox, and you're like, bruh, smallpox science versus where we are today, we shouldn't even be calling this stuff vaccines because it's not even the same science that they were using. What they were using for smallpox is what we call micro.
Yeah, but the smallpox vaccine was causing smallpox. When they stopped rolling out the vaccine is when the smallpox disappeared.
Yeah.
Because they'd go to towns that didn't have smallpox, vaccinate them all, and then they'd all end up with smallpox.
Well, what they should have done is they should have, when they did the smallpox vaccines in the beginning, they should have used the smallpox from the cows because the smallpox from the cows actually doesn't infect humans, but it builds your immune system so you can't get human smallpox.
Well,
but
you know,
it goes back to microdosing.
You know who was behind the smallpox rollout?
I'm sorry, what?
You know who was in charge of the smallpox vaccination program and the rollout of it?
Are you talking about the one in the 1900s?
Well, Bill Gates' dad.
Yeah. So if you go back further to the 1800s, around the Civil War era, they invented a smallpox vaccine that actually was literally just microdosing with the virus, which is the same science we use when you take herbal medications It's the same science when you use essential oils, right? It's all about microdosing. I think when you start talking about Bill Gates' dad and stuff, you're starting to talk about vaccines when it's not just microdosing anymore. They're like adding the mercury, adding the aluminum, adding, stem cells, right? Stem cells from who? Like as a white person probably shouldn't be getting stem cells from a black person, and an Asian person shouldn't be getting stem cells from a black person. You know what I'm saying? Like they're mixing up all these biologies because they'll say, oh, we're all just the one race, we're all the human race, and then they apply that for biology, which is literally the only time race should even matter, is in the sense of biology, because we all do have a different biology from one another. So you're not allowed to tell a difference in races when it comes to biology, but when it comes to society, it's all about the racial differences, right? Where it really shouldn't matter. And it's just so crazy. But most doctors these days have no sense in understanding common sense health anyway. Like you say something about, oh, I'm sick, I think maybe it's because I'm eating something I shouldn't be eating. Oh, well, let's go run an MRI test and a CT scan, and we're going to put a camera down your throat. And, oh, we didn't see anything, so you need to check into the hospital. We can't help you. And it's like, maybe we should have just talked about my diet and what's not in my diet or what is in my diet. But you can't have that conversation.
Let's talk about your lifestyle. What do you eat? What do you drink? How much exercise do you get? How much sleep do you get?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? These are all the basics that will cure most problems that people go to doctors with. But no,
that's the same with the kids, right?
But have a prescription instead. There you go. Take these tablets. These will sort that out. But then you might need these tablets as well for the side effects from them tablets, and then you'll need these tablets for the side effects from that tablet and the side effects from that tablet. And it is.
They're used to being drugged up, right? Because they're used to taking pills every day for ADHD. They're used to getting shots. They're used to injecting themselves constantly every time they go see a doctor, right? And then their parents probably give them what afterwards? Ice cream made with corn syrup. Oh, you got your vaccine. Yeah. Let's go get you your corn syrup ice cream. Oh, it's like, honestly, I'm surprised so many people are still alive. When you think about it all.
Well, it's like if you look at pictures of people at the beach in the 70s and then people at the beach today, the obesity is ridiculous. Now, what's changed? What's in the food? What have they been feeding us? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that and portion sizes. Because even if you look, so I'm very active in the bodybuilder community. I have been for over a decade now. And so obviously in bodybuilding, you have people who shoot up testosterone and do all other kinds of things. But then you also have bodybuilders kind of like me who just eat all organic food, right? And you can see the difference in the bodies. But it's interesting, so I have friends who are even vegan bodybuilders. They don't eat animal meat. Everything's vegan. And their bodies are still bigger than the average bodybuilder was before Arnold Schwarzenegger showed up, before the steroids, which I find to be really interesting, that natural bodybuilders today are much bigger than bodybuilders who were starting to mess around with testosterone in the 50s and 60s. And I think that goes back to portion sizes, right? Because our portion size now is twice the size it used to be. And then people who are into that type of fitness, right? You've got the whole big pharma side. And then that's one thing I think why I've been so involved with bodybuilding for so long is it's not necessarily building the muscles. It's the lifestyle behind it. Because I would say the average bodybuilder has more understanding of basic human health than the average doctor with an MD does. When you've got a health problem, the first thing they say is, how much sleep did you get? What are you eating? What are you not eating? They look at your proteins first. They look at not just if you're eating carbs, but what kind of carbs are you eating? What kind of vegetable? Did you know this vegetable can mess up with this organ? You should switch it for this vegetable. And that's just normal, everyday, common sense conversations that are happening in the gym is, oh, my gut hurts. Oh, you should try this enzyme. Oh, my head hurts. You should try these mushrooms. There's like always a food or an herb that's organic for any problem. That's why you got people who are like 70 who look like they're 50, but their bodies work like they're still 25. Because they're kind of dealing with all of that. What's interesting
that's
is the
it,
gym
because
that I'm in right now actually caters to children. So I actually see a lot of middle school kids in the gym, where most gyms I've even worked at before, they don't allow kids in middle school in the gym yet. So it's interesting how there's like this very holistic culture, but the gym is also where I find the most people who are going to speak out against what's happening to the children. They're more likely to speak out against having to wear masks. There's just, but you know what? I think it's because they also have more testosterone, right? Talking about men and that male energy, that male essence, right? It's like a place that it's celebrated to be a tough testosterone filled man. So it's interesting how different, right, that type of society is towards, right, the pharmaceuticals, the children, and the ability to speak up versus people who just sit down.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just kind of ranted about that. Just got all excited.
Well, that's the thing, though. Doctors aren't trained to heal the way they used to be. Doctors are trained now just to write prescriptions.
They're trained drug dealers for big
Yeah,
pharma.
that's all it is. Drug
That's
dealers.
like the whole transgender thing. It's not really about celebrating somebody being different. It's about, oh, look, we've got a bank account for life in this one.
Well, it's one of them. At the end of the day, kids aren't. Their sexuality hasn't developed, and the topic we're talking about is what they're being taught at school is inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because their sexuality hasn't developed, and it's not going to develop at that age unless it's being forced on them, like the curriculum's trying to. So,
and what I also wanted to add, that age is the age of not experimentation per se, but finding out things, you know, what is going on.
Discovery and play. That's what it is. It's learning through play. And if they're having this sexual stuff pushed on them,
they're going to learn how to play. They're going to go home and want to learn how to play with what they just learned about in school.
Yeah.
That's why I honestly think that they might claim it's going to decrease teen pregnancy. I think it's going to increase it at a younger age, unless they're doing this to try and see who's already infertile at a young age. You know, you got a whole bunch of 12-year-olds now having sex. They're definitely not old enough to understand protection whatsoever, even if you are teaching them all of this. I mean, how many adults have had that stuff shoved down their throat and at 40 are still never doing it? You know, it's a lot of us. And
that is actually a possibility, because how many of these kids are actually vaccinated now with this COVID vaccine, you know? So yeah, it could potentially be seeing who has been affected in that way.
And on top of it, if you have one that's not vaccinated having sex with one that is when they're 12, I mean, that could cause them not to be. But then again, if you are a weird eugenicist who your whole point is to depopulate humanity, well, what's the quickest way to find out whether or not your experiment on your rats has worked or not? You try and push them to be sexual at a younger age so that you don't have to wait, right? Instead of 16, you can now see this taking effect at like 10, right? Because there's a lot of girls that are able to have children at 9, 10 years old. And I honestly think that with an sexual education like this, the possibility of seeing 9, 11, 10, 12-year-olds teen pregnancies is going to increase, not decrease.
But you know,
with
what you've just said, how many have actually had the COVID shot and then it has sterilized them.
Yeah.
So when they can't produce kids, but they are having sex, but they're just not getting pregnant, then they're going to turn around and say, look, our education programs worked. Teen pregnancy dropped. Well, it's dropped, but not because you've taught them. Do you know what I mean? It's dropped because you've poisoned them.
And then no one's going to, because if you catch on to it and you say it, you're going to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, because these are people who are not supposed to want to have children until they're like, what, in their 20s. So this is a whole decade that people that the sex is going to be happening, that people are infertile, and that people are going to deny that their children are having sex at 12. They're going to deny that their child can't reproduce because they can't even imagine that their child's having sex at 12 with their neighbor. And then it doesn't happen until most women these days don't start having families till they're close to 30 now, you know?
Yeah.
So this is like 20 years until they start realizing how infertile that the kids' generation is. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but then you'll be able to go and buy a baby off Bill Gates. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think what is important to, like, we have spoken about so many things. So I would just like to summarize that it is very naive for the parent to think that there is only one agenda going on with this.
Yeah.
There is multiple agendas going on, and the sooner you get your head out of the sand, or whatever the saying is, you know, the better you can start protecting your children and the children around you, because no one else will protect the children but us, the people that are aware of it. And we are actually raising the awareness by having these uncomfortable conversations, you know. And the more these uncomfortable conversations are had, the more often, and especially with people that are not wanting to have them, you know, at least somewhere around them circulating in, you know, family dinners, family parties, whatever. We have to raise the awareness, and we have to do the due diligence ourselves to protect the innocent children of the world, you know.
Yeah. And then that's the other thing is, right, for those who don't want to hear it, is what's the best way to approach the conversation. I think obviously one great thing is if you are aware of what's happening in your school districts around you, like I just found out the principal of one of the high schools just got arrested for sexually abusing students, is just being, oh, hey, did you hear the so-and-so school got arrested for this? Have you heard anything about it? You know, oh, can you imagine what if that was happening in our school district, right? Because even then having that conversation, you kind of gauge where somebody's closed-minded versus open-mindedness is. And then that way you can avoid looking like a conspiracy theorist. Then you just look like a gossiper, which sometimes it's better to be a gossiper.
I wanted to say in these kind of scenarios, you know, gossip is what the world is made of, to be honest, you know, in a lower vibrational world. Yeah, when it comes to stuff like this, I think the best way is like what I would like to maybe bring in from my experience, nonviolent communication, right? It's such a huge topic in itself, so I won't go in too much, but it's how to communicate so it's not necessarily triggering. And it's by asking questions. Mm-hmm. So just as you demonstrated right there, you know, asking a question, have you heard? Have you seen? You know, so it's not like coming to a person and being like, you are close-minded, you are not caring about your kids, and you know. It's not wrong, but it's not right either, because the person will close down and then there is no conversation to be had. So questioning things and having those conversations where there's, yes, maybe slightly gossip, but then maybe it's inquiry, you know, that will begin the conversation and the awareness and the spreading of this information.
Yeah.
That's it, because what they're trying to teach the kids is going to instill into them habits and behaviors that are going to lead to traumas, addictions, because you're going to have kids with porn addiction and sex addiction from early ages.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to realize what it is, because to them it's just going to be a habit. Do you know what I mean?
One of the homeschool parents I was talking to, she said she's a mentor.
And
she says the girls, church girls who are active in a church community, even they have confided in her that they have intensive addiction to porn and masturbating, that they can't even go a day without it. I mean, can you imagine being 16 and being that sexually fresh? I mean, I can't imagine once you're with somebody, like you've already ruined it. Because you're just like, you've got that weird, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm speaking from experience. I've been in that addiction role before, and I know how empty that feels. how at the end of the day, it like destroys your energy as opposed to building it up. At that point, you might as well just go have a makeout buddy. Just make out with somebody, you know, much more fulfilling.
Well, what is addiction? Addiction is a disconnection.
Yeah.
This is exactly the same as pandemic. This is why they're showing porn in schools from the early age, to disconnect them from the real intimacy, from understanding what it takes to build a relationship, to even have sex, you know, because in a normal, if a child has not been bullied or has not been abused in any sort of way, they will understand the beauty of taking the time to get to know the person, to even kiss.
Yeah.
Whereas now, because of porn, you know, in porn, no one even kisses, is because most porn stars do not want to get that intimate with the guys. Like in sex work and escorting, most sex workers, they hate kissing because they're like, it's too intimate, like we don't want to do it. So imagine kids being taught that, you know, don't kiss, go straight to the ass.
Yeah. And that's what they are being taught.
Yeah, you know, so it's like everyone knows that, you know, if you have sex vaginally, if the intercourse is vaginal, you will lose your virginity, right? Which is probably also a myth about the hymen and all of that stuff, but that's what they're being taught. So the easiest way for them to stay virgin is to go at the, you know, from the back doors, which
and they're being taught about
yeah. My understanding is that's used common in like Saudi Arabia, where they actually check women constantly to see if you're still a virgin or not. So a lot of them will go, you know, for anal sex when they're 14, 15 years old.
And the trauma that has, like from my personal experience, I have been working with this amazing healer, yes, and one of my traumas that she picked up on was actually, you know, the energetic abuse that I have received when I had anal. Mm-hmm. She said, because it's not supposed, like, energetically, that's not the place to have sex with, you know. Yeah. Like when you practice tantra, all the chakras, all the energy points that travels through your chakras goes through your, you know, through your vagina and up and
that's why kissing with sex re-energizes from one person to the next. It's that whole energy thing. That's why what's so strange with reading what they're teaching the children, it's not even tantra sex, right? Because tantra sex within itself, which I still do not think is appropriate at all for those ages, at least has a whole system that teaches about self and your self-sexual energy. And there's a whole thing with masturbating with tantra. There's a whole thing with men and lifting weights with their penises. That's like the yoni egg for the female. I mean, there's all these other things that are about, and even then they teach in tantra, right? About masturbating, but not orgasming to increase the energy and decrease it. And it gets into all these intensive energies, right? Which I think is still too much for elementary, middle, and most of high school. But at least that would be sexual education.
Yeah, I think like when it comes to tantra in itself, like I think, maybe I would say what I'm seeing right now as we are talking, maybe 16 years old, right? Because let's be honest, we are not going to be able to, you know, tell a kid not to do something. They're going to do it. Like I started at 14, you know, and if someone would have said to me, don't do it, I would have been like, go fuck yourself. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it like, you know, more than anything. But that's because of how abused I was as a child. I was the biggest rebel, you know, I know. And so from that age, maybe 15 even, you know, start teaching the energetics, start teaching them about their body, how to make love.
Right. Well, then that's where, as a parent, right, that's your duty, right? Because as a parent, it's your duty to have enough of a relationship with your child to notice, is that part of themselves waking up? Like I've noticed, so like I have 3 children, 2 girls and a son. And we've noticed with both of our daughters at like 2 years old, they started touching themselves, just naturally. Because like I said, we homeschool. So any of that stuff I see, I know it's coming from within, right? Because some people are just naturally more charged than others, right? They just came into the world more of a sacral than others, right? But as, they do that, it's always like, that's your private part. Your private part is for private time. You need to go to the bathroom and wash your hands, right? So it's not about shaming them but to a point they stop, right? Like, because when they first come out of the diaper, right? They're like, oh, what is this? I can touch it, Then it's like they kind of
exploration.
Yeah. But that's why I think they're teaching them that, because it's not sexual. It's like literally as a baby, they're used to touching everywhere else on their body except for their diaper. They finally get to be free of a diaper. So of course their hands are going to go there, because it's like, what is this?
And plus, if it's a brother and sister, you.
Yeah, that's one thing. When my kids were younger, they would take showers.
Why do you have that? Showers, baths together as well.
We had to get to a point where my kids one time, when they didn't have their clothes on, right? They put their butts together and started rubbing their butts like, ah, ha, ha. And then they turned around to do it the other way. And I was like, oh, no more showers together. No more. Private parts, private, for you only, private.
And but this is when you have that conversation, age appropriate,
based on what they're doing, right? So to me, there was no conversation about yours is a vagina, yours is a penis. That's your private part in general. Nobody's supposed to touch your private part. You're not supposed to touch your private part to anyone else's private part. That is your private part for private time when you're in your private room, going to the bathroom, taking a bath. Private. It's private part, private time only, right? Yeah. That to me that's and my oldest is 7, right? So that's the extent of the sexual education I've given her, right? Because she doesn't need anything more than that. And right now I don't have to teach them anything, because right now they're helping to reinforce that with their younger sister. Oh, you can't go outside. You don't have any panties on. People are going to see your privates. You can't do that, Yeah. So it's so I know that they're reinforcing that, but since I see how they reinforce it, now it's a little irritating, because like my husband likes to walk around in his underwear. Sometimes I like to walk around in my underwear, and now they're like telling us you can't do that, but that's them again. Since we've taught them, they are now letting us as their parents know what their boundaries are, what they feel comfortable being around. So as a parent, this makes me feel more comfortable knowing how much children are being sexualized. I don't have to freak out about them going out and playing with kids, because I know that they're used to knowing these are my private parts. These are boundaries. If you're outside your boundaries, I'm going to voice something, right? And to me, that's appropriate sexual education, right? But like you said, when they get older and start hitting puberty, right? Those emotions come up, that energy comes up. But I think that's why we, as being energy healers, right? We have a better sense of what we're looking at, right? And we have a better sense of helping to guide them. But it's not because we're necessarily sexual people, even though I think, Shakti, you can definitely.
Hello?
I think we've lost her.
I did not hear anything apart of Shakti.
Oh.
That was the last thing.
With the energy that comes through, right? Just understanding the energy with children, right? Like when they hit puberty, right? Because you can see it. And I think, it's almost like we as healers need to actually teach the teachers who are so eager to teach sexual education and be like, look, I think it's great that someone might, like, you probably come into this with trauma. You need to heal your own trauma first. Then
exactly what I wanted to say too. Yeah, it's an invitation.
How can you teach children when you're all fucked up yourself? You don't know what you're teaching because you're not even with it yourself.
Yeah.
All they're going to do is
this,
push their trauma onto the kids.
exactly. So I think if anyone has watched it up until now, because woof, we were talking, I think what we are, especially, well, it's coming from me, so I'm going to speak for myself, but it's an invitation to whoever is watching, whoever has kids, or knows who has kids. It's heal yourself first, before trying to put something on your kids that is your own conditioning.
Yeah.
And that it might not have it might not be a good role modeling, for the children itself. So please take the time, as much as you are able to start understanding yourself and where all of these beliefs and not beliefs are coming from, because most of the time they're not yours. They have been put on you, indoctrinated, brainwashed, and if you are not doing your own research, which Google, by the way, will not give you that research, you will have to dig much deeper and find people like Chris, like Lee, like me, who actually have other resources to tell us the truth that is true for us. And everyone's truth is their own truth, right? So it's like, we are not pushing this on people either. The right people who are ready to listen will see this, and it's an invitation for you go down that rabbit hole and heal.
I think that's another reason why it's important for us as adults to keep talking about this and talking about our own healing, right? Because even though my kids are still younger, they might get to a point where they're talking about stuff sexually where I feel overwhelmed. I feel like it's over my head, which is probably what happens to most parents and why they just leave it to the school. But I think that's why it's great we have, I have both of you, right? We have each other with different experiences, right, to bring to the table. So if as an adult I do feel overwhelmed, I have another adult that I've spoken to about sexuality to a point I feel comfortable with that other adult, so that I can sit down with my child and the other adult and let the other adult have that conversation with my child. But again, I think it's important as the parent to also be there, right? Because
of course, absolutely,
over your head, you can learn. And I mean, and second, you probably should never leave your child in a room with even the most trusted person to talk about sexuality, just because it's your child.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's your kid. It's your responsibility. Whatever happens, it's on you, not really anybody else.
And I would also like to add that I don't have kids personally, but from how I know myself and my parents, I am my parents' biggest teacher. So being open to learn from your kid as and when they're going through these experiences, whatever experiences that may be, it's such a huge learning curve for the parent, and yes, sometimes you will get overwhelmed. Most of the time you will get overwhelmed. But this is why when you do the work on yourself, when you do the work on your own nervous system, you have the bigger capacity to hold your whatever your children is going through, because you are the protector, you are the supporter, you are here to guide them. So getting your own emotional state and emotion, what did I say? Emotional system? No. Nervous system. That's right. Nervous system in a stable way is what gonna make this journey less bumpy. Not easier. It won't be easy. Less bumpy.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, when you feel overwhelmed, like you said, it's a learning opportunity for you as the parent as well, right? You don't just want to shut down. You want to expand yourself as the parent so that you can better handle those situations. But again, that's why I think it's great that we build community with other adults who see what's happening, who are willing to speak out against what is happening, but also willing to have those other deeper sexual conversations, right? Because right now we're talking about kids. I think it's a little easier when we start talking about, as adults, right, our own sexual kinkiness and strangeness and how expansive that can get. That in itself is a whole different conversation, right? And I think that's on the list of other conversations for us to have for anyone who's watched this video and they've enjoyed this video and they themselves are looking for sexual healing and having more of that sexual conversation. We're going to be here for another 4 weeks to talk about some of the other topics. And let me see what I have, because I wrote it down so that way we can let people know what the topics are that we've kind of suggested that we are going to talk about. So today we're doing child sexuality. Next week we're going to be doing sexual identity. Then we're going to do sexual abuse. Then we're going to do sexual play. So that's all that kinkiness. And then we're going to end with sexual healing, right? Because that's a lot to talk about as adults, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like for me personally, as much as I'm very, very vocal about this subject, because I haven't got kids, and it's a very touchy-feely subject, because it's like my nervous system is like, I almost cried. So
Yeah.
it's very, very interesting how it will, come through from this into much more liberating for me personally subjects where I have much more expertise.
Yeah. Well, especially when we get into the sexual play part. I'm gonna have a whole set of questions for you and be like, so this has been a fantasy, but what is your personal experience in real life?
I'm looking forward to that very much.
My face will probably be red half the time throughout that podcast.
I'm red right now, but I'm very hot. So okay, thank you so much, guys, for this space. I have to shoot, but this was absolutely amazing.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for putting us together like this.
Thank you.
No problem. It's been a nice, informative afternoon. So look forward to next week.
Next week it is. And I'm going to be in UK next week. So.
Ooh. We're going to be on the same island together.
That's right. Yeah, same time. Okay, thank you, guys. Take care.
No problem. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.
See you soon. Thanks for watching, guys.